Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'd like to get started with this investigation by giving you a little bit of a rundown of what I'm hoping to accomplish through this endeavor. My primary motivation, my primary motivation behind starting this channel is to look into various interpretations of self-identification in Buddhist philosophy. Ironically, this may be better stated as lack of self-identity. However, I do find myself struggling with what this means. Buddhism at the time of Siddhartha Gautama, Shakyamuni Buddha, sought to forge a new ontology, a new definition of being, one that was not tied to an ongoing permanent sense of self, which was referred to as an Atman. A lot of my motivation behind this inquiry began with my research into a text here by Richard F. Gombrich, referred to as Theravada Buddhism, a social history from ancient Benares to modern Colombo. It deals a lot with the historical transmission of Buddhism, but the aspects of the text that are most insightful for this particular discussion have to do with the definition or lack thereof of self-existence within early Buddhism. So I wanted to touch on a few key points that I have covered in this text, and that I believe will give you a better idea that will essentially help to set the stage for an ongoing inquiry into the idea of lack of self-existence within Buddhism, or the various interpretations of how one exists, how subjective and objective reality exist within this plane of reality that we inhabit. So I wanted to start out with the importance of the Vedic texts when it comes to how Siddhartha Gautama developed his philosophy or his opposition to the Atman doctrine. In early Indian philosophy, early Hindu philosophy, it is typically referred to as the Vedic religious period or the Vedic period. There are four main Vedic texts that dominated, that essentially encapsulates what Vedic religion means. These four texts are the Rig Veda, the Samaveda, the Yajurveda, and the Atharva Veda. These were formed between 1500 to 500 BCE before Common Era, with the oldest being the Rig Veda. The power of transmission for the Vedas was held by the highest caste in Indian society, which were referred to as the Brahmins. So Veda itself, and I'm going to pull a quote from the text itself, from the Gombrich text itself, to describe what Vedas are. So the word Veda means knowledge and refers in this case to sacred knowledge, knowledge about ultimate matters. In fact, the Sanskrit term for Vedic literature is Shruti, what has been heard. The texts have been heard by inspired sages. Ultimately, they are not believed to be composed by gods or men, but exist eternally, whether anyone is aware of them or not. So, Brahmins, I'm going to elaborate just a little further from the text. Brahmins are a class of men whose right and duty it is to preserve that which has been heard, Shruti. The whole Brahmanical ideology of society is based on this fact. Brahmins are a hereditary class. It is possible to lose one's status as a Brahmin by gross misconduct, and there were many unsatisfactory Brahmins who did not, in fact, study or teach the Vedas. But to learn them and hand them down was both the right and duty of only the Brahmins. And unfortunately, sons, because inevitably it became restricted to males. So Shruti, that which has been heard, is believed to be eternally true and infallible. It tells men what to do. Since it is the prerogative of Brahmins to learn and interpret it, all authority in Vedic religious society rested with the Brahmins. Now, the Sanskrit language is a fundamentally important part of the Vedas because the Vedas themselves were composed in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is believed to be an extremely sacred language. As Gombrich described it, Sanskrit words were believed were held to be ontologically prior to their referent. So hence Sanskrit itself existed prior to what it was referring to. So the Vedas as language thus are believed to represent the essence of reality. This aspect of reality, like all others, must have some kind of underlying unity. This unity is sometimes found in the syllable Om, which is said to encapsulate the entire Veda. Sometimes in more subtle principle, perhaps language not yet realized in utterance. So, as Gombrich states, this unifying principle or single essence behind the Vedas, therefore behind the Sanskrit language, therefore behind reality, was called Brahman. So, just want to differentiate. Brahmins, similar spelling, were those who believed that they had primary control over the dissemination of knowledge, dissemination of the Vedas. Brahman is the underlying essence of reality, the single essence behind the Vedas. So I also want to elaborate a little bit upon what is referred to as the Mahapurusha Saktu, or the hymn of the cosmic man, which is believed to justify maybe a little bit too harsh of a word, rationalize, describe the reason for the differentiation in the hierarchy itself. So the 10th and last book of the Rig Veda, which is presumed to be the latest, contains a famous hymn called the Hymn of the Cosmic Man. In this hymn, a huge male figure is compared and assimilated to the universe, which he both pervades and transcends. In verse 12 of this hymn, it states, his mouth was the Brahman, arms were made the royals, his two thighs that which is the Vaishyas, or the merchants, and from his feet were born the Shudras. So the cosmic man is equated with society. The most important point to consider here is that the society is conceived of as an organic whole, and this whole contains 4 classes of men who, by nature of things, are hierarchically ranked. By being his mouth, the Brahmins are thus seen as the mouthpieces of reality. They are the language which expresses that reality, for it is they who uttered the Vedas. So hence you can see a very strictly demarcated hierarchy here of status, essentially all coming through the notion of the organic whole of society, the Brahman, the macrocosmic essence of society. All beings are organically united, but there are differentiations in their status. So the Brahman, I want to introduce the next term that's very important, is Atman. So the cosmic man, I'm going to go with Gombrich here, he elaborates on this so eloquently. The cosmic man, according to the Purusha Saktu, created the world by means of a sacrifice in which he sacrificed himself, for nothing else was available. This cosmogonic sacrifice was then held to be prototypical for all sacrifices, so that the actual victim was a substitute for man himself. From this theory arose various elaborate and bizarre homologies, which the texts propose between the parts of the universe of the object of sacrifice and of man the sacrificer. The search for a single underlying principle played a very strong part in these speculations. Breath was probably the original meaning of the word Atman, which has become the most widely known of Sanskrit words for the soul. So if the essence of man was the Atman, and the essence of the universe was Brahman, the principle of macrocosm-microcosm equivalence led to the famous conclusion that Atman equals Brahman. So at death, the soul which realizes its identity with Brahman, the ground of the universe, will merge into it and never again know the pain of individuation. On some levels, this sounds like a wonderful philosophy, uniting with the cosmic whole. However, the Buddha had some pretty significant issues with this, and my speculation is you may have some issues with this as well. The Buddha's stance upon the Brahman orthodoxy was not good to give it too positive a spin. I would say it was rather negative in nature. In early India, He began to feel that not it wasn't just the Brahmins who maintained control of the authority of cosmic knowledge. Heterodox thinkers like the Buddha rejected the Vedas as a depository of final truth, and he also rejected the position of Brahmins as arbiters of the truth, because either rejection necessarily involved the other. So if he rejects the authority of the Brahmins, he's also rejecting the authority of the Vedas. What Buddha hoped to do was transcend the definition of Atman and show the lack of a permanent soul. And this is going to be the ongoing basis of my inquiries over my next few videos. So, as Gombrich states, the confusion has arisen because of the Buddhist teachings that beings have no soul, no abiding essence. This no-soul doctrine he expounded in his second sermon. He analyzed the individual into 5 constituents, which we may translate as body, feelings of pleasure or pain, perception, volitions, including unconsciousness and inherited drives, and consciousness. Each in turn is not the self, for it is impermanent and so ultimately unsatisfactory. We must remember that eternal immutability was essential to the Brahmanical conception of the soul. Since this analysis of the person into physical and mental components is meant to be exhaustive, it shows that there is no soul or self as a separate entity. All such terms as soul, self, individual, etc. are mere conventional terms, and the same is true of the names of beings. So essentially, we have here a rigorous, extremely rigorous dissection process where ultimately the Buddha, by placing individuals into 5 constituent heaps, or what in Sanskrit are referred to as skandhas, he essentially nullified any notion of an ongoing permanent sense of self or an ongoing sense of Atman. So the repercussions of this stance, well, were pretty severe. His doctrine subverted Brahmanism from every angle. He denied the authority of the priesthood, their monopoly of sacred knowledge, their claim to mediate the divine, their very reason for existence as society's ritual specialists. The status that really matters is religious status, which is achieved by personal efforts. A scribe status, the caste hierarchy, is something that exists in the world, a fact of life, but of no spiritual significance. The true Brahmin, said the Buddha, was the man with such universalistic values as gentleness and honesty. The true outcast was the man with corresponding vices. Not by birth, as the Buddha stated, not by birth is one a Brahmin or an outcast, but by deeds, by one's karma. So, I just wanted to set the stage for future digressions. As I've indicated, the name of my channel, bit of a kind of a humorous title, I thought, Buddhist Philosophical Digressions. Part of this is, it's a very intriguing notion behind using this title for my channel. Buddhism believes that one should not engage in what's referred to as idle chatter. So in terms of too many philosophical digressions could be destructive to your spiritual life. However, there is nothing wrong with engaging in tremendous inquiry through digressing from the main point at hand in hopes that one day we may be able to progress with our understanding. So my hope is that over the next few weeks, few months, as I begin to develop more videos and add them to this channel, we can have ourselves a fantastic discussion and hopefully develop and improve our own spiritual understanding. Thank you very much for listening. Have a lovely day.